The airport was crowded that morning. Passengers moved quickly through the long hallways, dragging bags, checking phones, and looking for their gates. Among them was a woman in a plain blue coat. She did not draw attention. Her steps were calm, and her eyes were steady, as if she had done this many times before. On the boarding list, her name was written in simple letters, but beside it was a number, 127. To the airline staff, she was just another traveler taking her seat like everyone else. She walked to the gate with quiet grace. The staff smiled politely and scanned her ticket. No one asked questions, no one noticed anything special. To them she was just one of the many passengers flying across the country that day. Yet there was something about her that carried weight, though it was hidden under her calm face and soft voice. Inside the plane, she found her seat near the window. She placed her small bag under the chair and folded her hands on her lap. She looked out at the runway, where sunlight touched the silver wings of other aircraft waiting for takeoff. Her thoughts were quiet, but her eyes held a depth that only few could understand. As the engines started, she leaned back. Around her, families talked, children played with small toys, and business people checked their laptops. She stayed silent, blending with the crowd, carrying a story no one knew. To the cabin crew, she was just passenger 127, a number on a list, someone to be given water and snacks like the rest. When the plane rose into the sky, she kept her eyes on the clouds. The world below looked small and distant. Her heart, however, carried memories of places where silence was rare, and skies were not so peaceful. She closed her eyes, remembering voices, codes, and the weight of responsibility. She had left that world behind, but it had never truly left her. Hours passed, and the aircraft flew steady above the blue horizon. Then came a sudden message from the cockpit. The captain's calm voice filled the cabin, announcing that the plane would be entering military-controlled airspace. It was routine, he said, and there was nothing to worry about. But outside, two dark shapes appeared in the distance, two F-22 fighter jets flying alongside the passenger plane. The sight made people curious. Children pressed their faces to the windows, pointing with excitement. Some adults whispered nervously, wondering why military planes were so close. The crew reassured them, saying it was normal in certain airspaces. Yet the woman in the blue coat did not seem surprised. She watched quietly, her eyes calm, as if she had seen this many times before. Then the radio inside the cockpit buzzed. A voice from the lead F-22 pilot came through, strong and clear. At first, it was standard communication with the passenger plane's captain. But then the pilot asked a question that froze the air inside the cockpit. Confirm. Is passenger 127 on board? The captain looked confused. He checked the manifest. Yes, there was a passenger 127. He hesitated, then answered carefully, affirmative. Passenger 127 is on board. Silence followed for a moment. Then came words that would change the atmosphere completely. Requesting call sign of passenger 127. The captain was now more confused. Why would military jets request the call sign of a civilian passenger? He left his seat for a moment and went to the cabin. Walking down the aisle, he found the woman in the blue coat. She looked up at him with calm eyes, as if she already knew he would come. Ma'am, he said softly, the F-22 pilots are asking for your call sign. Should I tell them anything? The woman held his gaze. For a moment, the sound of engines and whispers around seemed to fade. She slowly nodded, as if the time for silence had ended. With a steady voice, she spoke two simple words. The captain repeated them over the radio. The moment those words were spoken, the F-22 pilots fell silent. Then, almost in unison, both jets shifted formation. From the windows, passengers could see the fighter planes dip their wings and align with precision, flying as if in salute. The captain returned to his seat, stunned. Passengers whispered in confusion, not knowing what had just happened. But the woman in the blue coat sat quietly, her face calm, her story still hidden. She was just passenger 127 to everyone else. But to the F-22 pilots, she was someone far greater. Whispers filled the cabin after the strange sight outside. The passengers had never seen fighter jets move in such a way, and though no one understood the reason, they felt that something unusual was happening. Some took out their phones, hoping to capture the moment through the windows. Others simply stared, wondering who on the plane could make the military act with such respect. Passenger 127, the woman in the blue coat, remained calm. She did not react to the questions around her. A child sitting 2 rows behind asked his mother why the jets dipped their wings, and the mother only smiled nervously, unable to answer. The woman heard it, but she did not turn. She kept her eyes on the clouds, her face still and unreadable. In the cockpit, the captain and first officer were exchanging quiet words. The captain could not understand why the fighter pilots requested a call sign for one passenger. Even stranger, why had they reacted with such honor after hearing it? The first officer finally asked the question both were thinking. Who is she? The captain did not answer right away. He only looked out at the fighter jets keeping perfect formation on both sides of the passenger plane. He knew this was not routine. He knew the woman was not an ordinary traveler. A message crackled again through the radio. The lead F-22 pilot's voice carried respect this time, not the usual firm tone of protocol. Passenger 127 is acknowledged. Escort will continue until safe handover. The captain replied, his voice careful, understood. But may I ask, what is her call sign? There was a pause. Then the reply came, slow and almost reverent. Falcon Star. The words hung heavy in the cockpit. The captain had never heard that name before, but he could feel its weight. It was not just a call sign. It was a title that carried history. He looked back toward the cabin where the quiet woman sat by the window. Passenger 127 was not only a traveler. She was Falcon Star. Meanwhile, in the cabin, a flight attendant approached her. She was a young woman named Myra, who had noticed how calm passenger 127 remained when everyone else was restless. Myra leaned closer and whispered politely. Ma'am, the captain says the pilots outside recognized your call sign. Is there anything we should know? The woman in the blue coat turned her eyes to Myra. Her gaze was kind, yet strong. She gave a small smile, though it carried no amusement. There is nothing to fear, she said softly. They are only paying respect. That is all you need to know. Myra nodded, though her curiosity grew stronger. She wanted to ask more, but something about the woman's steady voice told her to stop. She quietly returned to her post, leaving passenger 127 to her silence. Outside, the two F-22 jets flew with discipline, their wings glinting under the sunlight. To the trained eye, it was clear they were not just guarding the passenger plane, they were honoring it. Every movement was precise, every angle respectful, as if they were flying beside a commander rather than an airline jet. Back in the cabin, the news began to spread from row to row. Passengers had heard fragments of the captain's words and the name that came over the radio. Some whispered the words Falcon Star, repeating them with confusion. No one knew what it meant, but the sound of it carried importance. A man in a business suit leaned across the aisle and asked, "Who is Falcon Star?" A woman near the front shook her head. "I don't know, but it must mean something great if fighter pilots react like that." Passenger 127 heard these whispers but stayed quiet. She had lived years where names and call signs carried power, but she had also learned the value of silence. Sometimes, silence was the strongest answer. The journey continued with the fighter escort close by. For the first time, many passengers felt a strange mix of safety and awe. They were not only flying to their destination, they were part of something larger, something they could not yet understand. As the hours passed, the captain walked down the aisle once more. He stopped near passenger 127 and spoke in a low voice. "Ma'am, I do not wish to intrude. But the name Falcon Star has brought honor from our military. Would you allow me to know who you truly are?" She looked at him, her expression calm. For a long moment, she did not answer. Then she leaned slightly closer and said in a voice only he could hear, "Some names belong to the past. Some names stay hidden until the right time. For now, Captain, let me remain as passenger 127. The captain nodded slowly. He understood that pressing further would gain nothing. She had given her answer, even if it was not the one he wanted. The fighter jets outside continued their silent salute, and inside the plane, the mystery of passenger 127 deepened. She was just a traveler to most, but the skies remembered her differently. The plane flew steady through the sky, but inside the cabin, a quiet tension grew. The passengers kept glancing at the windows where the F-22 jet stayed close. The name Falcon Star moved from whisper to whisper, filling the air with questions no one could answer. Passenger 127 sat still, her face calm, her hands folded. She did not try to explain herself, nor did she seem bothered by the attention. It was as if she had lived through moments far heavier than this, and a plane full of curious eyes meant little to her. The captain, though respectful of her silence, could not shake his thoughts. The name Falcon Star echoed in his mind. It was clear the military pilots did not treat it as just a name. They treated it as a symbol, as something that carried weight across the skies. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, the radio came alive again. The lead F-22 spoke with a tone filled with respect. "Confirm that Falcon Star is comfortable. Escort will continue until exit point." The captain answered carefully, "She is well. We thank you for your escort." The voice from the jet replied with words that only deepened the mystery. "It is not an escort, Captain. It is an honor." The captain sat back in his seat, realizing that whatever story passenger 127 carried, it was one far beyond his understanding. Back in the cabin, Myra the flight attendant walked quietly down the aisle. She noticed that many passengers were staring at passenger 127, their curiosity stronger than ever. Myra wanted to protect her from too much attention, so she stepped closer and asked gently, "Would you like something to drink, ma'am?" Passenger 127 looked up and gave a small smile. "Water, please." As Myra placed the cup on the tray, she whispered, "Everyone is speaking about you. The pilots outside, the name Falcon Star. Should I tell them to stop asking questions?" The woman shook her head. "Let them wonder. It is better that way." Her calm voice gave Myra a sense of peace, and she nodded before stepping away. Still, she could not help but glance back, feeling that she was serving someone who had once stood far higher than a passenger seat. Hours passed, and soon the plane reached an area where the sky was clear and the sun glowed soft on the horizon. The passengers grew quieter, their earlier excitement fading into silent curiosity. The two F-22 jets still flew in perfect formation, unwavering in their respect. Then something unusual happened. From the lead jet, a small flare of light shot upward, tracing the sky like a shining signal. Gasps filled the cabin as passengers saw it. It was not an attack, not a warning. It was ceremonial. A sky salute. The second jet answered with a flare of its own, and together they created a brief arc of light that hung in the blue for a few moments before fading. To the ordinary eye, it looked like a simple military display. But to those who understood, it was a sign of the highest honor. Passenger 127 watched it without moving, though a shadow of memory passed across her face. She remembered skies lit with signals, radios filled with voices, and moments where every decision carried lives. She had walked away from that world, yet here it was, saluting her again. A young boy sitting near the aisle stared in wonder. He turned to his father and asked, "Papa, why are they doing that?" The father smiled softly, shaking his head. "Because someone special is on this plane." The boy's eyes widened. "Who?" The father looked toward the quiet woman by the window but said nothing more. As the plane moved forward, the captain made another announcement. His voice was steady, though inside he still carried awe. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. The military jets outside are showing respect to one of our passengers. There is no danger. Today, you are all sharing this flight with someone who carries honor in the skies." The cabin filled with soft murmurs. Some passengers looked at passenger 127 with admiration, others with confusion, but no one dared disturb her now. She had become more than a traveler in their eyes. She was a mystery wrapped in dignity. The journey continued, but for many, the flight no longer felt ordinary. It felt like history unfolding in quiet ways. And while the passengers wondered who Falcon Star truly was, she kept her silence, knowing that some stories reveal themselves only when the time is right. She had been just a number on the manifest. Yet now, she was the center of the sky's respect. The evening sun painted the clouds in gold as the plane continued its journey. The passengers had grown quieter, their earlier questions left hanging in the air. Every now and then, someone whispered the name Falcon Star, as if speaking it too loudly might disturb the calm power it carried. Passenger 127 sat near the window, her face steady, her eyes watching the endless horizon. To the people around her, she looked like a woman of simple grace, but inside her mind memories stirred. The salute of the jets, the way the pilots had spoken her call sign, all of it brought back chapters she had locked away. Years ago, long before she was a passenger with a number on a list, she had lived another life. She had flown not in comfort but in duty. She had once sat inside cockpits where every sound mattered and every signal meant survival. She had been known by a name that carried weight: Falcon Star. She remembered the first time she earned that call sign. It had not been given lightly. It was a name chosen after long hours of training, after missions where courage and calm had been tested again and again. The name did not belong to her alone, it belonged to the trust of those who flew beside her. But she had stepped away from that world. The skies had demanded much, and she had given it all. When her service was complete, she chose silence, a life far from radios and flight suits. She thought the world would forget. Yet here, on this simple flight, the skies remembered. Back in the cabin, passengers tried to understand without disturbing her. Myra, the young flight attendant, felt her heart pull toward curiosity once again. When she walked past the quiet woman, she paused and whispered softly, "Were you a pilot?" The woman looked at her with calm eyes. For a moment she said nothing, then replied gently, "I was many things, long ago." Myra nodded, sensing there was more behind those words but not pressing further. Something about the woman's tone carried finality, as if her past was not meant to be opened like a book for everyone to read. Outside, the two F-22 jets remained steady. To those who knew, their presence was not just protection. It was tribute. A tradition older than many passengers could imagine. Military pilots were trained to honor those who had left a mark in the skies. And Falcon Star was one of those rare names that still echoed in training halls, still whispered in stories of courage. In the cockpit, the captain and first officer spoke in hushed voices. "Falcon Star," the first officer said slowly. "I have heard that name in old reports. She was one of the best." The captain nodded. "And now she sits in our cabin as if she is no one." "She doesn't want recognition," the first officer said. "No," the captain agreed. "But respect follows her whether she seeks it or not." As the hours passed, the flight approached its next waypoint. The jets outside shifted position, preparing for handover to another sector. But before leaving, the lead pilot's voice came through one last time. "To Falcon Star, with honor. The skies remember you." With that, both jets tilted their wings in perfect unison, their final salute. Then they broke formation and disappeared into the fading light. Gasps filled the cabin once more, and some passengers even clapped softly, though they did not fully understand. Passenger 127 closed her eyes for a moment. The salute touched her, though she did not show it openly. She had lived through days when recognition came with pressure, not peace. But this was different. It was not demand, it was respect. The passengers felt the weight of the moment even without knowing the full story. A young girl near the middle row leaned toward her mother and whispered, "Mama, she is important." The mother smiled gently. "Yes, dear. Important in ways we may never know." As the night grew deeper and stars began to shine outside the window, the plane continued its calm journey. Yet for everyone on board, the flight no longer felt ordinary. It felt as if they were sharing space with living history, though history itself refused to speak. Falcon Star had returned to the skies, not as a pilot but as a passenger. And still, the skies bowed to her. Night had settled across the sky, and the cabin was dim with only soft reading lights glowing here and there. Most passengers had grown quiet, some leaning back to rest, others staring at the stars outside their windows. Yet the silence was not ordinary. It was filled with thought, with quiet wonder about the woman known as Passenger 127. She sat near the window, her face calm, her eyes on the sky. To many she looked as if she were simply enjoying the view. But inside, memories stirred like hidden tides. She had not asked for recognition, but the salute from the fighter jets had unlocked a door she had tried to keep closed. Her mind drifted back to a day long ago. The air had been sharp, the sun rising over a runway lined with steel and noise. She had stood in her flight suit, helmet in hand, ready for another mission. Back then, she was not Passenger 127. She was Falcon Star. The call sign had not been given to her because of one mission. It had come after years of training, years of proving herself in skies where mistakes were not allowed. Falcon Star was a name earned through calm decisions when storms raged, through steady control when others lost balance, through courage that spread to those around her. She remembered the voice of her commander the day she received it. "You hold the sky steady," he had said. "You guide others even in silence. From now, you are Falcon Star." That memory still echoed in her heart. It was not pride she felt, but a quiet sense of weight. The name belonged not only to her but to the trust of those who once flew beside her. Back in the cabin, a passenger sitting across the aisle could not hold his curiosity any longer. He was an older man, his hair silver, his voice gentle. Leaning slightly toward her, he spoke. "Ma'am, forgive me, but I must ask." The name they spoke today. Falcon Star. Were you truly part of the Air Force? For a moment, she did not answer. Then she turned her head slightly and gave a calm nod. "Yes. Long ago." The old man's eyes lit with quiet respect. He did not press for details, but he gave a small smile. "I thought so. Only someone who lived the skies could sit so calmly with jets beside us." She returned her gaze to the window, letting silence fall again. Yet his words had stirred more memories. There had been missions where her calm voice guided others through storm clouds, where her decisions kept her team safe. She had seen moments of danger, but she had also seen unity, the kind that only came when trust was complete. The salute she received today reminded her of those bonds, of pilots who had once looked to her not only for skill but for strength. Myra, the flight attendant, passed by again. She noticed the quiet exchange and the faraway look in passenger 127's eyes. When she paused, the woman gave her a small smile, as if to say she was fine. Myra smiled back, but inside she carried more questions. She felt as if she were watching history live silently before her. The hours moved on. Outside, the stars filled the sky, and the plane glided steady across the darkness. Inside, the passengers carried a strange feeling. They were not just flying to their destination, they were sharing the journey with someone whose presence made the air feel different. At one point, the captain left the cockpit and walked down the aisle once more. He stopped by her seat, speaking in a low respectful tone. "Ma'am, I do not wish to disturb you. But I must tell you this. The pilots who saluted today, they spoke of you with honor. In all my years, I have never seen such respect given to one passenger." She looked at him quietly, then replied, "Respect belongs not to me alone. It belongs to all who once flew beside me. I only carried the name." The captain bowed his head slightly, understanding her words. He knew he stood before someone who carried not just skill but humility. As the night deepened, the plane flew on, but for everyone on board, the journey no longer felt ordinary. Passenger 127 was no longer just a number to them. She was a symbol, a living story that refused to boast but could not hide. She had been Falcon Star, and the skies had remembered. The night sky stretched endlessly outside the plane, filled with countless stars that seemed to shimmer in rhythm with the hum of the engines. Inside, the cabin had grown quiet. Most passengers slept or stared out the window, but passenger 127 remained alert. Her mind traveled back to a time long before she had been just a passenger, back when she was Falcon Star in every sense of the name. She remembered one mission, the mission that had defined her call sign. The sun had not yet risen, and a heavy fog covered the mountains below. She and her team had been assigned to guide a group of new pilots through dangerous airspace. Radar signals were weak, visibility almost non-existent, and one wrong move could mean disaster. Every second counted, and she felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. As the jets moved into formation, she took a deep breath. Her hands were steady on the controls, her eyes sharp, scanning every movement. She remembered thinking not of herself, but of her team, trusting them, guiding them, knowing that every instruction mattered. Falcon Star was not just a name, it was a promise to those who relied on her. Suddenly, a strong wind swept across the mountains, shaking the jets. Pilots in the formation struggled to maintain position, but she remained calm. Her voice came through the headset, clear and firm, guiding the younger pilots step by step. Adjust left. Maintain altitude. Keep formation tight. You are steady. Her words carried confidence and reassurance. The pilots followed, trusting her completely. Hours passed like this, tension building with every mile. Then, as the sun began to rise, the fog started to lift. Falcon Star led the formation safely through the hazardous airspace. Every pilot arrived without harm, their respect for her deepening with every word and movement. When the mission ended, her team had not only survived but had learned the true meaning of trust and discipline under pressure. That mission, she remembered, was not recorded in any public history book. It was known only in training circles and whispered among pilots. Yet it had earned her the respect of those who understood the sky, and it was why the name Falcon Star still carried power. The salute she received today from the F-22 pilots had reminded her of that moment, of every mission that had tested her courage and calm. Back on the plane, a young passenger near the aisle had been watching her quietly. He had seen the way the captain approached, the whispered words, and the respect in the air. Though he did not understand the details, he could feel the importance of her presence. His curiosity finally got the better of him. "Ma'am," he asked softly, "were you a hero?" Passenger 127 looked at him, her eyes kind but serious. "I only did what I was trained to do," she said. "Being called a hero is not mine. It belongs to those who trusted each other in the sky." The boy nodded, a sense of awe filling his young mind. Around him, other passengers who had overheard began to glance at her differently. She was no longer just a quiet woman near the window. She was someone who had walked where ordinary people could not, someone whose actions had shaped history quietly, without seeking recognition. Myra, the flight attendant, observed the small scene from the aisle. She felt a mix of admiration and wonder. She had seen powerful people before, but passenger 127 carried strength without showing it, command without raising her voice, and humility without words. The captain returned to the cockpit, his thoughts full of quiet respect. He had seen many flights, many passengers, but few had ever carried such weight. He realized that today's journey was different. This flight would not be remembered for its schedule or route, but for the presence of one extraordinary woman among ordinary travelers. Outside, the stars shone bright, as if signaling approval. The plane moved steadily toward its destination, carrying not just passengers, but the legacy of a life that had touched the skies. Passenger 127, though silent, held a story that only those attuned to the air could understand. She had been a leader, a guide, and a symbol in her world. Now, as passenger 127, she was quietly reminding everyone that courage and respect often travel silently, leaving a mark invisible to many but unforgettable to those who recognize it. The journey continued, and for the passengers on board, the air seemed charged with something unspoken yet powerful. Falcon Star's past had found its way into the present, and every moment in the sky carried a quiet honor. The plane was descending now, the city lights below sparkling like tiny stars scattered across the ground. The hum of the engines was steady, but inside the cabin, a quiet anticipation filled the air. Passengers stirred, preparing for landing, yet many kept glancing at passenger 127. There was a sense that the ordinary journey had become extraordinary. She sat near the window, calm as ever, but her thoughts were focused on the journey beyond the flight. The salute, the words over the radio, and the presence of the F-22 jets had reminded her that some moments never truly fade. She had left the skies of duty behind, yet the skies themselves had remembered her. The captain made his final announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are preparing to land. Thank you for flying with us today. We have had the honor of carrying a very special passenger, known as Falcon Star, whose past has touched the skies." A murmur ran through the cabin. Some passengers whispered excitedly, others sat in quiet awe. They had begun to understand that passenger 127 was not ordinary. She had carried the trust of many, faced dangers unseen, and earned a respect that reached far beyond their understanding. Myra, the flight attendant, approached her once more. She placed a hand gently on the back of her seat. "Ma'am, the passengers want to thank you," she said softly. "Even if they do not know your story, they feel your presence. You have inspired everyone today." Passenger 127 turned toward Myra and gave a small smile. "Thank you. It is not my story to tell. But I am glad it reminds others to act with courage and respect in their own lives." The plane touched down smoothly. The tires hissed against the runway, and the cabin filled with the sounds of relief and applause. Passengers began gathering their belongings, but many kept their eyes on the quiet woman by the window, sensing that she had been part of something far greater than the flight itself. Outside, the F-22 jets had not yet disappeared. They flew overhead in a final, precise formation, their silhouettes sharp against the evening sky. A gentle nod of wings, a final salute to a pilot who had once carried the weight of the skies on her shoulders. Passenger 127 watched silently, her heart calm. She had never sought recognition, but the honor was a reminder that some deeds, done with courage and quiet determination, were never forgotten. As the plane reached the gate, ground staff and security personnel seemed to pause, almost sensing the significance of the moment. The captain stood by the door, waiting for passenger 127 to step out. He did not speak, but his respectful stance showed that he understood her presence carried a history beyond ordinary comprehension. Passengers began leaving the plane, some offering quiet nods or small waves in her direction. Children whispered her name, adults gave subtle smiles. Even those who had not understood fully felt the weight of respect that surrounded her. She was more than a number, more than a seat assignment. She was a symbol of courage, dedication, and humility. Finally, passenger 127 stood and collected her bag. She looked around the cabin one last time, her calm gaze meeting the eyes of those who had watched her in awe. Without a word, she walked toward the exit, her steps steady and graceful, carrying the quiet dignity of someone who had lived in the skies and returned with nothing but respect. The captain watched her leave, then turned to the remaining passengers. "Today," he said softly, "we were reminded that courage often comes quietly. Some heroes walk among us in ways we cannot always see, and sometimes, the skies themselves honor them." Outside, the last light of day glimmered on the tarmac. The F-22 jets disappeared into the horizon, leaving the world below untouched yet subtly changed. Passenger 127 moved forward with a calm confidence, a woman who had been just a traveler to most, but whose story had left an impression on everyone who had shared this journey. She had been passenger 127, a simple number in the eyes of many. Yet she had carried a name that commanded respect, a life that inspired, and a quiet strength that even the skies could not forget. Falcon Star had returned to her world of peace, but the memory of her courage and honor would remain in the hearts of those who had witnessed it. And as the airport lights shone softly around her, she walked forward, carrying nothing but the quiet dignity of a hero who had once ruled the skies. The story of Passenger 127, of Falcon Star, was complete for now. Yet the respect she inspired would linger in the skies and in the hearts of everyone who had shared her flight.